You think you know Roman history, the Colosseum, the gladiators, the epic battles? Yeah, that's the PG-13 version they show you in school. What they don't tell you is that between the gladiator fights, they had intermissions. And those intermissions, that's when things got really creative. We're talking about a civilization that invented concrete, aqueducts, and roads that are still standing today, and they applied that same engineering genius to making people suffer as long as humanly possible. These weren't just punishments, these were carefully calculated, peer-reviewed, R&D approved methods of torture that would make modern horror movies look like Disney films. It's a Tuesday morning in ancient Rome. You're walking through the forum, maybe grabbing some bread, and you smell something cooking. Smells good, right? Wrong. That's a person. And that crowd over there? They're not horrified, they're placing bets. Little Marcus is on his dad's shoulders asking, "Daddy, why is that man screaming inside the giant metal cow?" And Dad's like, "That's not a cow, son, that's a bull. And that's not screaming, that's music. Now watch and learn." Here's what's absolutely insane. Public torture wasn't just legal, it was the main event. It was date night. It was family bonding time. 6,000 crucified bodies lining a road for 120 miles? That's not a war crime. That's Roman landscaping. That's their version of Christmas lights. Victims sewn into sacks with snakes, roosters, dogs, and monkeys, then thrown in a river? Just another Tuesday. Someone being slow roasted alive while their screams are piped out as entertainment through a bronze bull's head. Well, that's just Rome showing off its acoustics. They had better sound engineering than most modern concerts. But here's where it gets really spicy. One of these methods was so brutal that even the Romans, the same people who thought crucifixion was a reasonable response to jaywalking, tried to ban it. When the Romans think you've gone too far, you've really gone too far. That's like Metallica telling you to tone it down. And one inventor? He got to test his own torture device. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well for him. Actually, that's the only happy ending in this whole video. Picture this. You're a criminal, a Christian, or maybe you just forgot to laugh at the emperor's joke. Congratulations, you've won an all-expenses-paid trip to the Colosseum, and buddy, you're not getting a seat. They'd strip you naked because dignity is for people who aren't about to become cat food, and sometimes, they'd dress you up in a cute little costume. Maybe as Orpheus, the legendary musician, you know, the guy who could charm animals with his lyre? Yeah, the Romans thought that was hilarious. Let's see you charm this lion. Orpheus! Spoiler alert, he could not charm the lion. Now, these weren't your friendly neighborhood zoo animals. These were starved, pissed off, and had been poked with sticks backstage to really get them in the mood. Imagine being hangry, but you're a 400-pound lion, and there's a naked guy dressed as a Greek hero standing in front of you. It's basically ancient Uber Eats. But here's where the Romans really showed their creative genius. They didn't want it over in 30 seconds. That's boring. That's amateur hour. No, they'd tie you to a post, just barely out of reach of the beast's claws, so it would swipe at you, tearing off strips of flesh like you're a really screamy piñata. Or they'd release the animals in waves. First, a couple of wolves to get you warmed up, maybe take a leg. Then, when you're bleeding, exhausted, and probably reconsidering all your life choices, here comes the lion for the grand finale. The crowd would place bets, not on, if you die, let's be realistic, but how. I bet 3 denarii he loses his left arm first. No way. The bear's going for the face. It was like ancient Roman fantasy football, except the football is screaming and the field is covered in blood. 50,000 people munching on whatever passed for popcorn back then, watching you get absolutely demolished in high definition. Well, ancient high definition, which is just regular definition, I guess. And get this wasn't even reserved for murderers or serious criminals. Early Christians got thrown to the beasts just for refusing to worship the emperor. Your crime? Having a different imaginary friend than the state-approved one. Your punishment? Becoming a value meal. Some victims lasted minutes. Others died from shock before the real pain set in, which honestly, lucky them. But most got the full experience of being torn apart limb from limb while the crowd did the wave. Moving on to number 8, and oh boy, it's everyone's favorite, crucifixion. Yeah, you know this one from church. But I promise you, Sunday school left out the really spicy details. Like, they gave you the PG version. This is the unrated director's cut. Crucifixion wasn't just nail a guy to some wood and call it a day. Oh no. The Romans were efficiency experts. They invented concrete, aqueducts, and roads that are still standing today. And they applied that same engineering excellence to making death as slow and agonizing as humanly possible. This was a carefully calculated torture method designed to keep you alive and suffering for as long as possible. It's like they had a whole R&D department. Jenkins, how can we make this worse? Well, sir, what if we, brilliant, promote that man? First, they'd flog you. And I'm not talking about a spanking. We're talking about a whip embedded with metal, bone, or glass that would turn your back into ground beef. The Romans called it a flagrum, but I like to call it the meat tenderizer. Some people died from this alone, which honestly was the express checkout lane. But if you survived, congratulations, you've unlocked the next level of hell. Then you'd have to carry your own cross, or at least the horizontal beam through the streets to your execution site. You're already half dead from blood loss, dehydration, and the worst back pain in human history, and now you're doing CrossFit. Literally. You'd stumble through crowds who'd spit on you, throw rocks, and hurl insults. It was like the world's worst parade, and you're the float nobody wanted. Once you arrived at the execution site, they'd nail you to the cross. And here's a fun fact they don't mention in the movies. They didn't nail through your palms. That wouldn't support your body weight, the flesh would just tear through like wet paper. No, they nailed through your wrists, right between the bones, severing the median nerve. You know that feeling when you hit your funny bone? Imagine that, but it never stops. And also, you're dying. In fact, the pain was so intense that we literally invented a new word for it. Excruciating comes from Latin excruciar, rooted in crux, meaning out of the cross. The Romans invented a torture so painful we had to create new vocabulary for it. That's a legacy. But here's the real kicker, and I mean that literally. You didn't die from blood loss or the nails, you died from asphyxiation. When you're hanging by your arms, your chest cavity compresses, making it impossible to breathe out. To get air, you'd have to push up on the nails in your feet, scraping your shredded back against the rough wood just to exhale. Then you'd collapse back down, and the cycle would repeat. Up and down, like the world's worst stairmaster. This could go on for days, not hours, days. You'd hang there in the blazing Mediterranean sun or freezing night, pushing up and down, each breath a new adventure in agony, until your muscles gave out and you finally suffocated. Sometimes, if the Romans were feeling generous, and by generous, I mean they had dinner reservations, they'd break your legs so you couldn't push up anymore. Congratulations, you get to suffocate faster. What a gift. The Romans crucified so many people that they had standard operating procedures. After the Spartacus rebellion, they crucified 6,000 slaves along the Appian Way. That's one crucified person every 40 meters for 120 miles. Imagine driving down a highway where every few seconds there's another dying person nailed to a cross. That's not punishment. That's interior decorating. That's Roman feng shui. Now, we're at number 7, and this is where things get really creative. It's called poena culae, which means penalty of the sack. Sounds innocent, right? Like a potato sack race at a family picnic? Wrong. This was so brutal that even the Romans, the same people who thought crucifixion was a reasonable Tuesday, tried to ban it. When the Romans think you've gone too far, you've really gone too far. That's like Gordon Ramsay telling you your language is too harsh. This punishment was reserved for parricides, people who killed their parents or close relatives. The Romans took family values very seriously. Like, very seriously. Honor thy father and mother wasn't a suggestion. It was a, do this, or we'll do something so horrible you'll wish you were never born kind of deal. Here's the recipe, and I want you to really visualize this. Take one criminal, strip them naked, because apparently dignity is always the first thing to go in ancient Rome. Sew them into a leather sack. But wait, there's more. Before you seal it up, throw in a dog, a rooster, a viper, and sometimes a monkey. Yes, really, I'm not making this up. Each animal was symbolic. The dog represented shamelessness, the rooster represented aggression, the viper represented treachery, and the monkey. Honestly, I think the monkey was just there for chaos. The monkey was the Romans' way of saying, you know what this needs? More screaming. Now, imagine you're in that sack. It's pitch black. You can't move. You can't see. And you're sharing this tiny leather prison with 4 terrified, angry animals that are just as panicked as you are. The dog is biting anything it can reach. The rooster is clawing at your face with those dinosaur feet. The snake is striking at anything that moves, pumping venom into whatever it hits. And the monkey? The monkey is having a complete psychological breakdown, which honestly, then, and this is where it gets really fun, they'd throw the whole sack into the river. As the sack sinks, everyone inside is drowning, but not before tearing each other apart in a frenzy of panic. You're being bitten, scratched, poisoned, and drowned all at once. It's like a really terrible escape room, except the only way out is death. The water seeps in slowly, filling your lungs while the animals thrash against you in their own desperate fight for survival. It's a battle royale, and everyone loses. The Romans believed this method was so horrific that it purified the crime, like the suffering was so extreme, it balanced the cosmic scales. It was their version of fighting fire with fire, except it's more like fighting murder with nightmare fuel. Eventually, even they thought it was too much and tried to phase it out. But tried is the key word here. It kept popping up throughout Roman history because apparently some traditions are just too good to quit. It's like that friend who says they're done with their ex but keeps texting them at 2 a.m. Number 6 is the brazen bull, and remember that screaming we mentioned in the intro? The musical screaming? Let's talk about that masterpiece of human cruelty. This thing was invented by a Greek named Perolaus, who apparently woke up one day and thought, you know what the world needs? A giant bronze bull that cooks people alive while turning their screams into entertainment. And then he actually built it. This guy had a vision, and that vision was horrifying. He presented it to Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas in Sicily, like it was a new iPhone. Check out this new tech boss. The design was simple but brilliant in its cruelty. A hollow bronze bull with a door in the side. You'd shove the victim inside, lock the door, and light a fire underneath. But here's where Perolaus really earned his paycheck, and probably a one-way ticket to hell. He designed a system of tubes and stops inside the bull's head that would convert the victim's screams into sounds that resembled a bull's bellowing. So while you're being slowly roasted alive, your agony is being auto-tuned into a bull impression. The Romans loved it so much they adopted it immediately. This is amazing. It's torture and a sound system. Imagine being locked inside. At first, it's just warm, uncomfortable, but manageable. You're thinking, okay, this isn't so bad. I can handle this. Then it gets hot, really hot. The bronze starts to glow like a giant evil nightlight. Your skin begins to blister and peel like the world's worst sunburn. You're screaming your lungs out, but all anyone outside hears is moo. The crowd is laughing, applauding the realistic sound effects. Wow, it really does sound like a bull. Amazing craftsmanship. The heat intensifies. Your hair catches fire. Your eyes, and I'm sorry for this image, boil in their sockets like eggs. The fat under your skin starts to melt and drip like a really disturbing candle. And you're still alive, still conscious, still feeling every single second of it. The bronze conducts heat so efficiently that you're being cooked evenly, like a rotisserie chicken, except you're not a chicken, you're a person, and this is the worst thing ever. Death could take 30 minutes or more, 30 minutes of being literally cooked alive while a crowd enjoys the show and probably places bets on how long you'll last. But here's my favorite part of this story. And by favorite, I mean the only part that brings me any joy. Remember Perilaus, the inventor, the guy who built this thing? Phalaris was so impressed by the demonstration that he decided someone should test it out. "Great idea," he said. "Get in." Perilaus became the brazen bull's first victim. The Romans appreciated the irony so much they kept the tradition alive, sometimes literally using the same bull for centuries. That's right, this thing had a longer career than most actors. It was the Meryl Streep of torture devices. Halfway through our list at number 5, we've got fustuarium, and this one hits differently. Literally. This was special because it wasn't carried out by executioners or strangers. Oh no, this was carried out by your friends, your brothers, the guys you trusted with your life. Plot twist, they're now taking your life. Fustuarium was a military punishment for cowardice, desertion, or treason. The Romans didn't mess around with military discipline. If you were found guilty, you'd be brought before your unit, and the commander would lightly tap you with a staff. That was the signal. That little tap was basically the ancient Roman version of, "It's go time." Then your fellow soldiers, the men you'd fought beside, eaten with, bled with, the guy who saved your life in Gaul, the one who knew your family back home, the dude you played dice with last night would beat you to death with clubs and stones. But here's the really messed up part. They had to do it. Refusing meant you'd be next. So your best friend would pick up a rock, look you in the eyes, and smash it into your skull. Not because he wanted to, not because he hated you, because the alternative was joining you. And they couldn't make it quick, a swift blow to the head that kills you instantly. That's mercy, and mercy wasn't on the menu. No, they'd beat you slowly, methodically, break your legs so you can't run, shatter your arms so you can't defend yourself, crack your ribs one by one like bubble wrap. All while you're looking into the eyes of men you trusted, seeing their horror and guilt as they're forced to murder you. It's like a trust fall, except instead of catching you, they're beating you to death. Team building. If by some miracle you survived the beating, and let's be honest, that's a big if, you weren't saved. You were exiled, forbidden from returning to Roman territory. But good luck surviving in the wilderness, alone, with multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and no supplies. Most victims died within days from their injuries or exposure. So really, surviving the beating just meant you got to die slower and lonelier. Congratulations. The psychological impact on the soldiers forced to participate was devastating, but that was part of the point. It reinforced unit cohesion through shared trauma and made sure everyone understood the unit comes first, always, or you'll die by the hands of your brothers. It's the ultimate there's no I in team lesson, except there's definitely die in it. Number 4 is damnatio ad metalla, condemnation to the mines. And I know what you're thinking. Mines? That doesn't sound so bad. It's just hard labor, right? Oh, you sweet summer child. This wasn't a job. This was a slow-motion death sentence that could take years. Years. This was the Roman version of a subscription service, except instead of Netflix, it's suffering, and you can't cancel. First, they'd brand your face. Not your arm, where you could cover it with a sleeve. Not your chest, where you could hide it under a shirt. Your face. usually your forehead. A permanent mark that said criminal to everyone who saw you for the rest of your life. You'd never blend back into society, even if you somehow survived. It was like a really aggressive Yelp review, but on your face. Then they'd chain you. Heavy iron shackles on your ankles, connected by a short chain so you could only take tiny steps, like a really sad penguin. These chains never came off. You'd sleep in them, work in them, eat in them, probably die in them. The iron would rub your skin raw, causing infections that often turned gangrenous. But hey, at least you've got matching accessories. The mines themselves were hell, narrow tunnels, barely wide enough to crawl through, with no ventilation. The air was thick with dust that would shred your lungs with every breath. You'd work by the light of a single oil lamp, swinging a pickaxe in spaces so cramped you couldn't stand up straight. It's like the world's worst office job, except instead of a bad back from sitting, you get a bad back from being hunched over in a death tunnel. Cave-ins were common. Sometimes they'd pull out the bodies, sometimes they wouldn't bother. You'd just keep working, stepping over your dead companions, knowing you'd probably be next. It was like a really morbid game of hopscotch. The work was non-stop. 12, 14, 16-hour shifts. No days off. No breaks except to sleep in the same tunnels where you worked. Food was minimal, just enough to keep you alive and working. Water was scarce and often contaminated. It's like they looked at basic human needs and said, what if we just didn't? Your body would break down slowly, lungs filled with dust, causing a chronic cough that brought up blood. Muscles atrophied from malnutrition, backs bent permanently from working in cramped spaces. Infections from the chains and countless small injuries. Most people lasted 6 months to a year before their bodies gave out, but some survived longer, years even. Imagine living like that for 5 years, 10 years. Every day the same hell, every breath painful, every movement agony, knowing you'll never leave, never see the sun except through a distant shaft, never be free. Death wasn't the punishment, living was. At number 3, we're getting into the really creative stuff, being boiled alive, yes, like a lobster, but slower, and you're conscious the whole time, and also you're not delicious afterward. This method varied depending on what the Romans had available and how creative they were feeling that day. Sometimes it was water, sometimes oil, sometimes tar or pitch. Each had its own special kind of agony, like a really terrible wine pairing. They'd set up a large cauldron over a fire and bring the liquid to a boil. Then they'd lower you in, sometimes all at once rip the band-aid off, so to speak. Sometimes gradually, feet first, inch by agonizing inch, like the world's worst hot tub experience. How's the temperature? Too hot? Yeah, we know. With water, your skin would turn bright red almost instantly, like the worst sunburn imaginable, but covering your entire body. Then, the blisters would form huge, fluid-filled sacs that would burst and peel away, exposing raw flesh underneath. The pain receptors in your skin would be firing at maximum capacity, sending signals to your brain that it couldn't even process. Your brain would basically be like, I don't have enough RAM for this. But water was almost merciful compared to oil. Oil heats to much higher temperatures than water. When you hit boiling oil, your skin doesn't just blister, it fries, like actually fries. The fat under your skin liquefies. Your flesh literally cooks and falls off your bones like pulled pork. The smell is indescribable, like burning pork, because chemically, that's basically what you are. Fun fact, that's not a fun fact at all. Tar was even worse, which I didn't think was possible, but the Romans were overachievers. Tar would stick to your skin, continuing to burn even as you thrashed. It would seal your mouth and nose, suffocating you while simultaneously cooking you. You'd die from asphyxiation and burning at the same time. It's multitasking, but make it torture. The Romans would sometimes use this method for Christians, criminals, or prisoners of war. They'd set up the cauldrons in public squares, making it a spectacle. The screams would echo through the streets, a warning to anyone who might consider crossing Rome. It was like a really aggressive public service announcement. Death could take anywhere from a few minutes to half an hour, depending on the temperature and how much of your body was submerged, but every second felt like an eternity. Your brain would be flooded with pain signals, unable to process anything else. Some victims would go into shock and lose consciousness, which, lucky them. Others remained aware until the very end, which is basically winning the worst lottery ever. Number 2 is the tunica molesta, the troublesome tunic. But calling it troublesome is like calling the Titanic a bit damp. This was Emperor Nero's favorite party trick, and when I say party trick, I mean it literally. This psychopath would host elaborate garden parties at night, and he needed lighting. Torches? Too boring. Candles? Too mainstream. So he'd dress condemned prisoners in tunics soaked in pitch, tar or resin, tie them to stakes throughout his garden, and set them on fire. Congratulations, you're now a human candle. You're not just dying, you're providing ambience. The pitch-soaked fabric would ignite instantly, engulfing you in flames. But here's the thing about burning to death that nobody tells you: it's not quick. Movies lie to you. The flames would consume your clothing first, then your skin, then the fat underneath. Your hair would burn away in seconds, your eyes would boil and burst like grapes in a microwave. Your lungs would sear with every breath of superheated air. It's like the worst hot yoga class imaginable. The pitch ensured you'd burn slowly and evenly, like a well-made candle. You'd stay alive for several minutes, screaming, thrashing against your bonds, while Nero and his guests strolled through the gardens, sipping wine, admiring the ambience. Oh, Nero, your garden looks lovely tonight. The lighting is exquisite. Thank you. They're people. Some victims would die from smoke inhalation before the flames consumed them. Those were the lucky ones. Others remained conscious, feeling their flesh melt and char until their bodies finally gave out. Nero used this method primarily on Christians during his persecution. He blamed them for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, and this was his idea of poetic justice. You like fire? Here's some fire. Hundreds of people were turned into human torches to light his parties. The Roman historian Tacitus, who was no friend to Christians, even wrote that Nero's cruelty was so extreme that people started feeling sympathy for the victims. When you're so brutal that even ancient Romans, the same people who invented crucifixion, think you've gone too far, you've really achieved something special. That's like getting kicked out of a death metal concert for being too loud. And finally, we're at number 1. While not originally Roman, the Romans adopted and adapted various forms of death by 1,000 cuts from their encounters with other cultures, particularly in their eastern campaigns. Because apparently, they tried all the local torture methods like they were sampling street food. Oh, what's this? Death by 1,000 cuts? Don't mind if we do. The concept was simple but devastating. Keep the victim alive as long as possible while inflicting maximum pain. The executioner was an artist, and your body was the canvas. And not like a nice Bob Ross painting. More like a Jackson Pollock, except the paint is blood, and the canvas is screaming. They'd start with small cuts, fingers, toes, ears, nose. Nothing fatal, but each one a new source of agony, little appetizers of pain. Then they'd move to larger areas. Strips of flesh from your arms, legs, chest. The executioner would carefully avoid major arteries, can't have you bleeding out too quickly. That would be unprofessional. They had a reputation to maintain. Between cuts, they'd cauterize the wounds with hot irons. This served 2 purposes. It stopped the bleeding, keeping you alive longer, and it added a whole new layer of pain. It's like a 2-for-1 special at the worst restaurant ever. The smell of your own burning flesh would fill your nostrils, which is probably the only time you'd be grateful to have lost your nose earlier. This could go on for hours. sometimes days, if the executioner was particularly skilled and had good reviews on ancient Yelp. You'd watch pieces of yourself being cut away, knowing there's more to come, unable to do anything but scream and beg for death. It's like watching a really slow, really painful unboxing video, except you're the box. The psychological torture was almost worse than the physical, the anticipation of the next cut, the knowledge that it won't end until there's nothing left to cut. The complete helplessness as your body is systematically dismantled while you're still conscious. It's like being at the DMV, except instead of waiting for your number to be called, you're waiting to be dismembered. Some executioners would take requests from the crowd. Take the left ear next, cut deeper, can you spell my name? It was interactive entertainment, and you were the show. The Romans appreciated the artistry of it. A skilled executioner could keep you alive through hundreds of cuts, each one precisely placed to maximize pain while avoiding vital organs. It was torture as performance art. They probably had critics reviewing the executions. The executioner's technique was flawless, but I felt the victim's screaming lacked emotional depth. 3 stars. So there you have it. 9 Roman torture methods that made death look like a mercy, a vacation, a gift from the gods. The Romans didn't just punish criminals, they turned suffering into a spectator sport, a form of entertainment and a tool of social control. These weren't just brutal, they were calculated. Each method was designed to maximize pain, prolong suffering, and send a message to anyone watching. Don't cross Rome. The next time someone romanticizes ancient Rome, remember, this was a civilization that lined roads with crucified slaves, turned people into human torches for garden parties, and invented torture devices so horrific they had to ban their own creations. In Rome, mercy wasn't a virtue, it was a weakness. And if you ended up on the wrong side of Roman justice, you didn't pray for survival, you prayed for a quick death. Because in the Roman Empire, there were fates far worse than death, and you just learned about 9 of them. If you made it this far without clicking away, hitting that like button is the least you can do. You've earned it, and honestly, so have I for researching this nightmare fuel. Subscribe for more dark history that'll make you grateful you weren't born 2,000 years ago. And drop a comment. Which method terrified you the most? And be honest, did the monkey in the sack make you laugh? Because I know it did. See you in the next one. If you can sleep tonight, spoiler alert, you probably can't. And there you have it, proof that in ancient Rome, having a bad day meant something very different. If you survived this video without losing your lunch, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's way less painful than anything on this list, I promise.